So there's so much opportunity and need in the current state of the world. And it can mean that we're simply reacting to what's next. And, so what will allow us to be proactive in our reactions? Today, we talk to Dr. Christine Wood, who is the president of EPIC Leadership Center, where she will unlock how we might create meaning in our conversations, plan connections, and live the adventure of doing good inspired by who we are. We are processing something more than simply living our lives. We are intentionally being ourselves and doing good so that we can lead our life. My grandma had a great resume. Her name was GAMBY, which was short for Grandma Boyle, and she really had a clear understanding of what she wanted out of life. My mom was sharing this Mother's Day about GAMBY, and she said, she was really an amazing lady, not a great mom, meaning everything she did was kind of for her own game, or gain, one of the two. She was one of the first women in Oregon to be a radio DJ. She was single-handedly skinned a dead seal on the beach to make a rug for the beach house. And she was a tech wizard. Probably the only person with a video camera at her retirement facility. In the third grade, I was the lead in the Christmas musical. I was Boo Bear. I had a solo. I was totally cute, as you can see. And GAMBY was excited to come to my play because she had bought the state-of-the-art video camera. And she told my mom, hey, can I video Jeff's performance? Well, she did. And of course, I was the star. So exciting. Afterwards, she said to my mom, hey, did you want that footage of your son's play? And my mom was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And she's like, that'll be $25.
Oh dear.
When I was 20, right, that's Gabby. When I was 20, I was reading a book about Buddhism. And the author was saying, hey, you need to add good deeds to your life. And I looked back at my life and I ended up realizing, that with maybe church and Boy Scouts, that the only good deeds that I did were to get a good resume. I think I got a lot of my hardware from GAMBY. So after reading this book, I asked, how do I do good? Especially, how do I do good with GAMBY genes? So right now, we are asked to hole up and protect ourselves, to not go outside, to wear a mask and protect ourselves. And it's very easy to let that fear creep into our impressions of others around us. Are they the enemy? In this time of COVID-19, how do we do good? So that's our challenge for today. How do we do good in this time? How do we impact our communities for good while protecting ourselves? Today, we are with a very special person who I got to know about 10 years ago. She has been my transformational leadership professor, the person that introduced me to Ira Progoff's intensive journaling, and has always inspired my instructional design knowledge. Dr. Christine Wood is the president of EPIC Leadership Center, and she also is writing her memoir, which is called When Darkness Isn't Black, Spiritual Formation Through Healing Childhood Wounds. Christine, welcome.
Thank you.
What is EPIC Leadership Center?
Well, it's a character-based educational program. We work with highest risk kids and their families. Okay. And we teach them character based on the golden rule. but we use art to do that, and we use sport to do that. But the interesting thing about the golden rule, Eugene Peterson, who's, I guess, recently died, and I didn't know that until this week, but he did a paraphrase of the Bible, yes. And the reason he did that was he's very gifted in language, and you'll see that when I give you his definition of the golden rule. Very gifted. And he was teaching at a seminary, and then he decided to be a pastor. And he's a very introverted man, and so he went to Montana to do this in a little town. And he said he translates the golden rule. It's beautiful. He said, "Here's a rule of thumb for behavior. Ask yourself what you want people to do for you, then grab the initiative," which I love that whole proactive stance there. Grab the initiative and do it for them. So that puts goodness within the reach of all of us.
Mm.
What's the good thing we want to have happen to us? Well, where can we take the initiative and do it for someone else? It's pretty simple.
That is.
Yeah, so I'm here in the time of COVID, and obviously, you can see from my gray hair, I'm in this highest risk group. And so we've been quarantining, which is fine for me, because when I start telling you these stories, you'll think, oh, she's such an extrovert, but I'm really not. I'm barely, on a personality profile, the MBTI, I have one step into extroversion. And it would be okay with me to be in quarantine the rest of my life, because I would think and read and create something. But right now, what I'm doing is, the thing I'm having most fun doing is taking walks with my dog, Cargo. I should have Cargo in here.
Tell me about Cargo. Who's Cargo?
Cargo. Well, first of all, I've called my friend Deborah Lloyd, and I said, Deborah, I want to get a Labradoodle, but they're $3,000 in Southern California. She said, well, you can get them for $300 here. So I got on the internet, and I said, Labradoodles in Portland, Oregon. And that's how I got Cargo. And what happened, and this is very appropriate for COVID, okay? So when I got him, we live in Ventura, which is 70 miles north of Los Angeles and 30 miles south of Santa Barbara. So we had him sent to Santa Barbara. And when he came in, I had no idea what I was going to call this dog. When he came in, he wasn't in Cargo. So my husband, the practical engineer, said, well, just go ask the manager, So anyway, the long story, an hour and a half later, we found out that Cargo had been sent to the wrong airport. Early at 4 o'clock in the morning, we're up to get down to John Wayne Airport. Go to baggage claim, and they said, we don't take dogs here. He must be in Cargo for them. And then it was a mix-up and a mix-up and a mix-up, and I got to Cargo. I got inside, and I said, they said, well, how can we help? And I said, you've got my dog. And they said, we don't have any dogs. I said, well, let's just talk about this a little bit. I said, I've been to Santa Barbara. They sent me the baggage claim here. I've been to baggage claim. They sent me to you. I think you've got my dog. I've talked to people who are with him, and they say, oh, he's cute. He's such a wonderful dog. And he is. He's a medium-sized chocolate Labradoodle. And he's 5th generation, so he looks like they're supposed to look. So anyway, I said, I am going to go out into cargo myself and I'm going to find my dog. So I go out the door and there's this little crate. And there he is. There's Cargo. He was 9 weeks old. And I pulled him out and he smelled like urine and feces. It was just delightful. And he was trembling all over. So I held him and petted him and talked softly to him. Halfway home, Jack, he stopped trembling. And that's when I knew I had his name.
Oh.
What it symbolizes is when things are a mess, that's not the end of the story. And that's where we are in COVID, right? We're in a mess.
So you've been taking him for walks.
I've been taking him for walks. And I trained him to do this because I always thought he would be my dog that would help me open up conversations, meaningful conversations. And he has done that. And so I wrote about this and I told Jeff this story, and it's a wonderful story. If you wake up in the morning in COVID and you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to make this day an adventure. Years ago, I read J.I. Packer's book, Knowing God. And at one point in that book, he said, a relationship with God is calculated to thrill a person over a lifetime. So I'm expecting today to be an adventure, right? So anyway, Cargo and I are walking down the street and we come to this arch on the sidewalk. Flowers, the sun is shining, and we see these signs. Thank you, essential workers. And we go on and it says, have a nice day today. And then you go on and it said, things are going to get better. And I walked by the driveway and it said, wash your hands. And I thought, I'm going to take Cargo to the door and I'm going to talk to the artist in residence. So I knock on the door and this woman comes out, this mother, and she's, looking at me like, why would you be knocking on my door? Social distancing, the whole thing. And here's Cargo and he's sitting down, he has no leash. He totally obeys me. All I have to do is go, and he quits whatever he's doing and comes right to me. He's sitting down there smiling with his tail moving at the speed of light. Who can resist Cargo? So I said, I don't mean to be intrusive, and I'm your neighbor and I live right up the street. I introduced myself. And I said, Cargo and I are just enjoying this artwork and we'd like to thank the artist in residence. And so she said, well, that would be my daughter and me. So I said, could you get your daughter, please? So she brings her daughter out, and here is this girl. Her name's Amberly. Isn't that a lovely name? Amberli. It's a great name. Anyway, so right there, I know I've got a creative mother, right? Her name was Hannah. So, she's kind of looking at me, kind of. And I introduced myself, and I told her how much I loved her art. That it made me smile, and Cargo loved it too. And by the way, we have 2 neighbors next door to us who are both essential workers, and they walk this neighborhood with their kids, and they are going to see this sign and they are going to be so excited about it. So I just want to thank you for creating this sign for them. And so Hannah says, well, thank you. We didn't know if any essential workers would see it. I said, they're going to see it. They're going to be encouraged, and it's going to help them do a better job. So that's all and then we walked on. So we're walking, we come home, and about 3 days later, you talk about your grandmother, I'll talk about mine. 3 days later, I thought, I have a book in our family room. It's about 4 inches thick, and it's a book from the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. And it's every single painting in the museum. And it used to be a train station, so a large museum. And honestly, it's my favorite art book. I've got lots of art books, but I don't put them out, but I love that one. Mm. So anyway, it crossed my mind, you could take that book down to your new friends. But first you'd have to ask permission. And then I thought, now wait a minute, that's an expensive book. And blah, 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 blah. They wouldn't be interested. And I did this for a couple days, resisting. So we don't always automatically do good, right? We don't. So, and then I heard my grandmother say this to me. Chris, you've lived a rich and rewarding life. You have everything you could possibly hope for. Why would you not share this book? Shame on you. Get cargo, and let's go down there and offer to loan them the book. So I did. I took cargo. At first I resisted that. But then.
Does your grandmother have a loud voice?
Yes.
Okay.
She's like your grandmother, but she wouldn't have charged. She's very generous. She said that to me. I've taught you to be generous. I want you to go do it. So anyway, I go down there, and not with the book, because I don't want to be intrusive. I don't want to have assumptions. And I asked Hannah. And she said, Chris, my grandparents must have been to that museum when they were in Paris. They're artists. And they taught all of us how to be artists. We would love to see this book. I said, okay. I was surprised, actually. She didn't resist at all. And so I came home, and Cargo and I did our walk. I always take extra time, plan extra time, because I never know when I'm going to get into these conversations. And I do it based on who I can encourage. That day, it was this little girl who did art with her mom. So anyway, I come home. It's about 40 minutes later, and I hear a ping on my phone for my email, and it's Hannah. And she said, I had been trading funny videos with her for COVID for her family too, ever since that first day. But anyway, she said, Chris, when you came, I was baking a lemon blueberry coffee cake. And I want to bring some to you and your husband. Can I do that? Well, I am not baking during COVID. I think you should all know that. I would like to, but it's kind of a hassle, and so I'm not doing it. But anyway, of course, I said, oh, we love it. And why don't you, she wanted our address. I gave it to her. I said, when you come, I'll have the book for you. So she comes up to the door with Amberly, and Amberly is looking like this. She's into this. She's so proud to be with her mother to do this. So anyway, I come out, I look at, and Hannah she's got her hand out like this. And I said, Hannah, this means so much to us because we love baking. And she said, well, Chris, baking is my love language. And I thought, what? I don't know anything. I knock on the door of a total stranger, and here we have this friendship that's developing. And in case you're wondering, that lemon blueberry cheesecake was the best cheesecake I've ever had in my life. And you know how you can sometimes eat baked blueberries and they're kind of mushy?
Yeah.
Every blueberry was singular. And
Oh.
it was juicy and it was scrumptious. And of course, I gave her the book. And Amberly, this is so beautiful. So Amberly holds the book, and it's heavy. I mean, it is heavy. Amberly's 10 years old. So pretty soon she gives it to her mother. And I look at her and I say, Amberly, now listen to me. You cannot keep a good woman down. And she looked at me, huh? I said, if you want to do something, you can do whatever you want to do. And she just said to her mother, I want the book back. 10 years old. It's priceless. But I just don't know anything. I never know what takes back when I do that. So if you were asking me yesterday, Jeff, what was it you said? People may want to do good, but how do they do it?
Yeah, I like it can be really intimidating. Like, you know, I have that scripture stuff in the beginning. You know, it can be golden rule can be really intimidating. And how do you make that less overwhelming? How do you you know overcome your fears of knocking on the door of COVID even to engage others in this encouragement, in the coffee cake? How do we do that?
Well, I think you have to do it as only you can do it. I don't expect many people to be willing to knock on doors, although I will tell you that I have had adventures doing that like you wouldn't believe. Can I tell them the Loretta Young story?
Yes. And then there's a kind of a, how do you know when that prompt is proactive and not out of guilt? You know, that's something to think about as well.
And my answer to that may surprise you.
Okay.
But let me just, talking about adventure.
Mm-hmm.
God has adventures for us if we just move on our impulses. Okay. So I grew up in a very hard family. Both parents were alcoholics, and they were not, they couldn't work. They were so drunk. And my mother was also paranoid schizophrenic. So you put those things together, and it's really bad. And one of the good memories of my childhood was General Electric Theater. And Loretta Young was the hostess of General Electric Theater. And every week, you have to understand our house is filthy and messy. Every week, she'd come out of this door when they started playing the music, and she would introduce what the story was going to be about, and she'd be so gracious. And I thought to myself, as a child at Amberly's age, when I get to be a grown-up, I'm going to have a life like that. I'm going to know how to dress. I wasn't taught anything from my mother. I'm going to know how to dress, and I'm going to be as beautiful as I can be, whatever that means. And I'm going to have a life that's gracious. So I was walking down the street. I was writing another book at the time. In Ojai. Ojai is a artist community 30 miles up the street. And I was walking the street with a friend, and I saw this house. And it wasn't an elaborate house. That wasn't the point. There was a graciousness about this house and about the yard. And the landscaping wasn't particularly fancy. It was just gorgeous. So I go, and I said, Beverly, excuse me, I just got to do this. So I went up. See, I was moved by beauty. And so I knocked on the door, and it turns out that was Loretta Young's house years ago. And it had fallen into, she had sold it and moved away, and it had fallen into disrepair. This new owner had restored it. Somehow she got pictures of it. She invited me to come in for a tour of the house. And then they were having a wine tasting party, and I stayed for that. You never know but anyway, that's the way I can do it. Now, my friend Hannah, the way she could do it was bake. And she probably thought, I should share this with someone. But who? And maybe she's like so many of us, we don't know our neighbors. Yeah. I don't know. So she took so much delight in giving us this fabulous coffee cake. So I think you have to do it as you can do it. And remember, you will have to stick your neck out in some way to do it. But that is because God has created us for adventure. What adventure doesn't involve some kind of risk? So anyway, that's where I would go with that. Now, where's the next step that you wanted to go to?
Oh, the question was, how do you know when you have a prompt from your grandmother or from somewhere else that it's not out of guilt, and how do you sift through all of the everythings to focus so that you don't get burned out?
What? You do it feeling guilty.
Well, tell me more.
All right, I will. First of all, I kind of have a rule, which I'm breaking right now for the sake of a teaching moment. I don't tell people what I do.
Oh.
I just go out and do these things. And so often I'll just say to the Lord after it's over, and it's so wonderful, Lord, this will just be our secret. And it's best if you do it that way. But even if you do it out of guilt, then the answer that comes back to you when you're thinking about it is, Lord, I'm sorry I did this out of guilt. I did this out of the wrong motives. I didn't want to do it, but you were there for me. You showed up. It's all right to say to God, would you show up and show off? We're living, I like Thomas Friedman a lot. And he had an article in the New York Times 2 weeks ago where he talked about this book Together, which was written by a former Surgeon General of the United States. I think he was under Obama. He's young. He's a young man. But it was so fascinating. He's written a book called Together. And the book is about the epidemic in this country of loneliness. So I do what I can do to break that apart. Now, you see, I move in these situations to create opportunities because I'll probably have Hannah and her family over for dinner when the COVID rises, when we're through this with this stay home thing. And I'm going to tell you how I'll do it. I'll go to Costco and get one of their prepared chili verde dinners because they're delicious. I used to cook gourmet meals and blah, 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 but I don't want to do that anymore. Okay. So I'll do this. And when they tell me it's wonderful and could they have the recipe? And I said, the recipe's at Costco. I don't take any pride in it. I just make it doable for me for what I can do because I'm really quite engaged with the Epic Leadership Center. So, but I leave the door open. Now, a week later, I had written up this story for a class I'm in right now. So that's another thing you do during COVID. You can learn about what interests you because God will give you a chance to give it away. And it'll be a blessing to someone. I wrote the story of going to Anna's house, and I took it down to them. And so they would have it forever if they wanted to keep it, which is none of my business whether they do or not. But, and it's a delightful story. My professor loved it. He thought it was just great. So anyway.
What'd you call it?
Love in the Time of COVID-19, which is a takeoff, as you know. This Nobel Prize winning writer wrote a book, Love in the Time of Cholera. It's all about sex. But this is all about considering people more important than you are. So anyway, if you have the wrong motives in doing it, do it anyway, because the only way you're going to get sensitive to those nudges for an adventure are as if you just do it. And I'll tell you, for whatever it would be, like, Angie, let me ask you this question. What is it that you enjoy doing? It's just fun for you.
Well, I like to do archery and I can't do that right now. So I'm doing something similar to you. I'm walking and trying to stay open to any interaction that comes my way.
Yeah. Well, here's what I would encourage you to do. You probably know some of these archers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Send them an email. You could send them an email and you could say, I was just thinking about you and realizing, and say something positive that will build them.
That's a good idea.
You know, yeah. So maybe you'll never knock on the door of a stranger. And, you know,
yeah.
But what I'm saying is that what love looks like in the time of COVID-19 is for us to expect that today could be an adventure, and we could do something to make someone smile. It can be so simple. My husband is an administrative guy, and he organizes things and then makes them work. So he's working with prisons right now, and they have to have Zoom meetings, and they're interviewing promising students in the youth correctional facility to get scholarships. And the work he's had to do on that, nobody knows he's doing that. And to corral all the people who are supposed to be somewhere at a certain time is hard. And so he's doing it. And that's what he can do during COVID. And he's walking with me in cargo. Now, he wasn't with us that day, but I will say this. He is so introverted. He is so introverted. And he, you know, when I first started letting him walk with me, he would say, "You're not going to go knock on that door." I said, "Watch me. You know, I will just go down the street and look for someone to encourage." And so it works for me.
Well, and what I'm noticing about this for you, you're doing what you are kind of designed for, what you love.
Right. Yeah.
And then also another part of it that I didn't realize is it's kind of a secret.
It's a secret. You don't have to tell anyone about it. In fact, it's better if you don't, because the more you talk about it, the more important you think you are, which is a big mistake. You know, it is.
Mm. What does it mean to lead your life rather than live it?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you a background, okay, for my answer to this. when I was in training with an adult educator about how to educate adults, because it's quite different to educate adults than to educate children. And I was learning all this, and it's really interesting. And she said, you should always think of your learners as subjects of their learning, not objects. And what that means is that we can learn things, but the only way we can learn things is by doing them. Head knowledge alone, there's 6 levels of learning, is only on the first level. And to be honest with you, I hesitate to say this, but I will say this because it is true. I went to a national Bible study. It has a branch here in our county. My husband and I went. And this is my problem with the church. It tends to be boring. And you know, I said 40 years ago, I said, this is what I want written on my gravestone. Here lies Chris Wood. She took every risk God ever offered her to take. But here was this Bible study of people, and they were not learning, they were reporting. They were, you know, giving, everybody had the same answer. Nobody was thinking. They were objects of learning. They were not subjects of it. And subjects of learning are this. I mean, in life, it's where you take responsibility every day for how you're going to live your life. Okay, it's COVID. All right. What are you going to do then? Are you going to change and become passive and sit and do nothing because you're afraid? Or are you going to say, who am I in the middle of this? And what do I have to give? We had a board meeting for EPIC last night, and we had this young woman. Her name is Jocelyn. She's on our board, and she's graduating. She in the first generation in her family to ever go to college. She's graduating, and she's going to be a teacher. And I had everybody come to the board meeting and share a symbol of what their life is like in COVID. And she said, well, I don't have a something to hold in my hands, but what I have is a picture for you. And I'm a runner who has stopped. And she said, what I'm learning in COVID, and see here, she's a subject. I am taking time to do the things that I haven't had time to do, which are actually more meaningful than what I was doing. And I think that's happening. I think there's more and more opportunity to do good to people, and that they'll respond. And if they don't, you will learn. If you just walk away and say, stick my neck out there. Okay, that didn't go well. Say, for instance, I knock on Hannah's door and I say, hi, I'm your neighbor up the street. And she said to me, you do not have your dog leashed. You should. And I've had people say that to me. If she had said that to me, I would have said, you're right, and I have a leash here, and I'll put him on the leash. But in the meantime, would it be possible to talk to the artist in residence and see where it goes? And just so you know, I have Cargo off the leash, and 1 in 200 people says to me to put him on the leash because he never disobeys. He doesn't go out in the street. He doesn't knock people over. He just goes up to people, wagging his tail, smiling, and saying, pet me. That's all he does. But I would never let my dog off the leash if I thought he'd be harmful. So just, I do have my little bases covered.
Well, and cargo seems to be an excuse. You know, it's an excuse to connect in some way. You know, you mentioned to me he's a very attractive dog. And so everybody wants to pet Cargo, and it's a great excuse to connect with a stranger for you.
It is. See, I like talking to strangers, but you may not. This is why I say you can't do it like I do it, and I can't do it like you do it. You know, I just wouldn't think about it because it wouldn't motivate me. But there are populations of people who have your interests, and they can be like your tribe to try this out on. Just don't talk about it.
So I have a graphic for you. I'm gonna. It's actually a poem. Would you like to see it? And I
would.
All right. So this is somebody who you mentioned, that Margaret Wheatley, and talks about dialogue. And I'm going to read it to you. I think this is a poem. If it's not, it's very poetic. Turning to one another. There is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Ask what's possible, not what's wrong. Keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that many others share your dreams. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty. Invite in everyone who cares to work on what's possible. Acknowledge that everyone is an expert about something. Know that creative solutions come from new connections. Remember, you don't fear people whose story you know. Real listening always brings people closer together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change your world. Rely on human goodness. Stay together. What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts? I love this. And because it's absolutely true. You know, her book, Turning to One Another, which I think this came from that book. In her book, she gives rules for dialogue, and I'm not going to give them to you because you can go out and buy the book, and it takes you less than an hour to read it. It's a short book, and but one of the rules is stay curious about each other. The way I get into these conversations is I ask people open questions. And if I don't understand what they're saying, I'll say, let me share with you what I think I heard you say, and you can correct me if I didn't hear you correctly. And then we go from there. And then I ask them questions about, okay, how'd you come to think that way, Jeff? That thought has a history with you. And I'm curious about it because it's a very creative idea. You know, you do not know where you're going to get your next brilliant insight, and it could come from a child. It could come from a child. Was there anything useful about what I said today?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And I was going to just write a question because we are challenged by people's nerve endings crumbling. And it seems like this kind of time frame is a little bit more universal than I thought it would be, like 2 to 2.5 months, and people are losing it. And okay, our neighbor is gotten caustic, you know, and aggressive, and my husband got emotional about it, and I'm like, okay, that's not normal. And so I'm trying to figure out how to be kind and to reach across the fence, and without compromising my stance, you know. And I just have to say to her, like, we're all human. We're working on it. And but I bet you have a much wiser way to put it.
I'll tell you a story, Janie.
Excellent.
Down in Cabrillo Village, we have a boy whose brother's in prison for life for murder. He's 24 years old. And this boy's 12.
Hmm.
And I got him in Taekwondo because I knew that he needed. I knew that he needed an outlet for his physical energy because he's very sad and very angry. And his mother is impossible. Sound like your neighbor? She's
Maybe, yeah.
yeah, she's absolutely impossible. And so I wrote to her. Now they're doing it online through Zoom meetings. They're having Taekwondo. And by the way, this boy is gifted at Taekwondo. Okay. He's halfway to a black belt with very little effort at all. He's going to make it because he's a natural. Okay. He's that good. He's beautiful. If you were to see him in a whole group, you'd say, gosh, this guy's fat. He's got the moves because his body just moves that way. And I don't want him to leave Taekwondo. And because it's the one place where he is, where there's discipline and there's respect. But mom is impossible. And so I wrote to her Monday, and I said a text. Good texted her, and I said, I need to know if Noelle has been in the Zoom because I have to pay for this, and I just need an answer. No answer. I said I need an answer today, if possible. No answer. I texted her last night. No answer.
Mm-hmm.
So this is crazy, okay? Before I dropped this kid from Taekwondo, I happen to know he loves carrot cake. I'm going to bake the kid a carrot cake. And I'm going to take it over and I'm going to say, this is your favorite, and I just wanted you to have this. And he'll love it. He will. And then I'm just going to talk to him about, Noelle, I just hate to have you not be in Taekwondo. Can you tell me your story? And he will. And we'll take it from there. But for his mother, I will send her a text and say, I have baked Noelle a carrot cake, and I'm going to take it to him. And I am wondering when a convenient time would be. So, and I will step around her, but I will be gracious. I will have a smile, but she is impossible. There's a reason her son is in prison for life.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that helps you at all, but you can always, I love texting, but never, ever, I don't get into it with people who are impossible. And of course, there's a story there, which I won't go into, but this woman is impossible.
Yeah, I don't think writing things is the way, like you're saying. I think doing things takes so much more than the words.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know what to do. Here's the thing, you just have to do it.
Yeah. Thank you. It's great.
Yeah. But I know what impossible people are. And, it used to be I tried to fix them. But
Well, they just need to be nurtured. Maybe they haven't been at all.
it also means that I think that I have all the answers.
Yeah.
Don't. And I just raise my hands when I am with someone that's really impossible. And I go out of my way to keep the lines of communication open.
Mhm.
This boy got, to tell you, he got into serious trouble down there. He could have been arrested. And I got involved in it, and which I should have, because it was dangerous and evil. Yeah. So, but I went to Mom and I said, "This is what happened. Here's how I can verify that this happened. I wanted you to know what happened." And then then she said, "I'm so afraid," and blah blah blah. That she becomes vulnerable. And then I went back to her and I said, "I have someone, an attorney, who could talk to your son about what to expect from this kind of behavior in the future." "Oh, I really love that. I want that." "Well, send me a time and we'll do it." Again, nothing. Get nothing. A few days later, do the same thing. "Veronica, did you want me to?" So I just try to be nice, and it's not going to work. And you learn that. But the only way you learn is when you make so many doggone mistakes.
Yeah.
One benefit of aging, get more chances.
It honestly is. These are the best years of my life. I'm having a great time.
Excellent.
Thank you, Christine. This has been so good, and it also makes me think about hanging out at our house when you were taking us through the intensive journaling 10 years ago, and it makes me want to hang out with you more. So thank you for being here. One of the things that I really appreciated, the question about guilt was mine. How do you kind of discern? And then what I loved about it was kind of putting the ownership back on me of like, do it anyway, whatever, if someone unknowingly benefits from my guilt without me putting my guilt on them, I can reconcile that and be okay with that.
I'm glad it was an encouragement to you,
It
because
was.
we can talk however long we want to talk about how guilty we are or how unworthy we are. Well, that's no secret. It's no secret. It's amazing that we can do anything to benefit someone else, if so, and that God would ask us to do that. There's a verse, 2 verses in Hebrews 3, New Revised Standard, where it talks about we're partners with Christ. And that's always, when I started saying that, I had all these evangelical Christians saying to me, "We're not partners, what?" And I thought, well, let me show you where it says that, because if we're partners in that, he would do that. He wants to do that. He delights to do that. So he'll take us. This is what I think, Crystal. He'll take us any way he can get us. Any way he can get us. Because he loves us so much, and he wants us to have these experiences. He wants that for us. There is one more thing that I'm doing, love, in the time of COVID that I'll tell you about, because I'm doing a lot of stuff, but one of the things I'm doing that's very hard to do, actually, is we have a child in Epic at this farm, in this farm labor community, where you have generations of poverty. And if you can imagine it, this mother has 4 kids at home, and she picks strawberries. She picks them 6 days a week. And she has a daughter that if any of us had this child, we'd be beside ourselves. This kid is extremely complicated. She's doing poorly in school, and you know, people ignore her, and she's angry and she's sad. And the first day I met her, I never met a child like this. She was in 2nd grade, and I watched her in the class. She was hostile to the workers. She was hostile to her classmates. She was isolated. And I looked at her and watched her this whole morning, and I thought, if someone doesn't intervene for this child, she's going to grow up to be a high school student, go down to the local high school with a gun, and I'm not kidding you. That's exact. And actually, she's drawn pictures like that. Later, I saw her pictures like that. So anyway, one of the ways that it looks like to me at this time is coming alongside that family. And the mother, she can't verbalize how scared she is and how tired she is. She has, I think, a 3rd grade education from Mexico. She doesn't know how to write or read. So, in her little school in some rural area in Mexico. And when you eat your strawberries, you can think of her. But is to come alongside her. And what that looks like right now is taking her daughter to daycare every day, because she's not protected at home. You can't control her, or they don't know how to control her.
Yeah.
That family doesn't know. I can pretty much control her, but I'm not with her all the time. So creating a place, you know, a safe place for her, making sure she gets there, and helping the family. I've got help for them, counseling services for the entire family. They're going to start again when we can get out of social distancing. And the whole family's going to, because they all need it. She needs it. She'll have individual counseling, then for the whole family. But I mean, there are people around you that need help. Know that there's things they can't do. Like, for instance, Janie, your neighbor, maybe this isn't true, but it's something like this, may not be able to think straight, or may not be able to be objective. Then you don't have to shame her or embarrass her. Just know that whatever it is, you'll learn. It's like God's invitation to you to learn about what is really going on, and you will ask him for discernment, and he'll give it to you slowly, and it'll come very subtly, but you'll learn, and you will learn how to live at peace with her. And out of that, you'll be able to, if you keep your relationship with your husband open, you'll be able to share these little things with him, so that you don't need to take her personally. You know, I don't know if that makes sense to any of you, but I have to think that way a lot of times when I've really done what I think I can do. So much of this involves listening to yourself and your reactions, listening to people when they talk, how they talk, watching their body language, and learning to listen to God. And he just gives us subtle guidance all along the way, I found.
So what I'm noticing about this is that there is a true, you really have to dig down to what's important to you and begin to generate how that looks like for another and try it out. The adventure is trying it out and then being secret about it.
Yeah, but I would say that even before you find out what works for you, is to say, I don't want to be a boring person. I don't, not, you know what I mean. I don't.
I mean, I think that that's pretty accurate. I mean, I don't want to be a boring person.
No. And people don't, I mean, we're the ones that make ourselves boring.
Is safety boring?
No. And so that's part of it too. You like, for instance, my neighbor down the street. It was safe to knock on her door because first of all, the artwork showed me that there was something good going on in that house.
Mm.
That, you know,
Yeah, there's signs.
Workers, things are going to get better. There's something good going on in that house. Number one. Number two is bright daylight. Number three, I knocked on the door and moved back, you know, so that I was doing the social distancing, and I had a smile. And those are the things that you'd look for clues. And what I love about what Margaret Wheatley said in that poem is, you know, being willing to talk to people that you think are really different than you.
Yeah.
I was down in the worst part of town. It's the absolute worst part of town. And I was taking needs assessments for something I was doing. I was doing interviews on the Golden Rule. And I talked to this man who drove a truck, and he was delivering things to this seedy-looking grocery store. And after he was all done, I waited and I watched, and then I went to him and asked him if I could just talk to him for a few minutes. And I talked to him, and I asked him, what do you know? Do you know anything about what do you know about the Golden Rule? He didn't know anything, and I told him. And so then I explained it. I said, and ask him more open questions about it. I was doing this interview to put on our website. It's not on our website now, but it was for a long time. Anyway, I didn't think anything about it. When I was through, I gave him a $10 Starbucks gift card. And I thanked him for the interview. And I gave him my card. And that evening, I got a phone call from him. He lives in Los Angeles. And he said, I just wanted to thank you for treating me so nicely. He said, no one treats me that way. And then I asked him some question. Pretty soon I get the story. He's, you know, he and his wife are living with her parents. And it was a really hard story. And it was near Thanksgiving. And he just said, this just has helped me so much. And I just want to thank you. So Be nice.
I want to just thank you again, because really, I wouldn't be doing the work that I do without you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And it's
Yeah.
been a privilege. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and thank you everybody. Thank you, Janie, for being on the call. And why don't you? I just feel like, Christine, if you want to end with this statement, it's almost like a blessing, almost.
It is. And this is Morris West, and he actually went to Catholic seminary, but he didn't become a priest. And he was one of the best American writers of the last century. But this is a quote from his book, Shoes of the Fisherman. It costs so much to be a full human being that there are very few people who have the enlightenment or the courage to pay the price. One has to abandon altogether the search for security and reach out to the risk of living with both arms. One has to embrace the world like a lover. One has to accept pain as a condition of existence. One has to court doubt and darkness as a cost of knowing. One needs a will stubborn in conflict, but apt always to total acceptance of every consequence of living and dying. I love that.
Any parting words?
Love to all of you.
Love you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bye.
Bye-bye.